We'll give you 10 if you can pay for one, Nina laughed, her voice slicing through the marble silence like glass breaking. The boutique erupted. Pearls shook, cameras lifted, and every head turned toward the black girl holding the red designer bag. Eva didn't flinch. She set her black card on the counter like a detonator. "Are you sure?" she said softly. "You can afford that bet?" The terminal beeped once, approved. The laughter died. And when the screen flashed the name Lewis Enterprises, 3 women realized too late, they hadn't mocked a customer. They'd mocked their owner's daughter. Before we continue this thrilling story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now let's get into the story. Nettie Bevis and Angela Kirkland joined Nina's Cruel Symphony, their laughter crisp and sharp, echoing between racks of designer dreams that carried price tags most people would never dare whisper aloud. The boutique was the kind of place where handbags cost more than luxury cars, where whispered conversations about who belongs floated like expensive perfume through the rarefied air. Eva Lewis stood unmoved in the center of their storm. Dressed in simple blue denim and white sneakers, she carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes not from trying to impress, but from never needing to. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her makeup subtle, her jewelry minimal. Everything about her presence spoke of someone who understood that true luxury whispers, it never shouts. The vivid red designer bag she placed on the glass counter was a bold punctuation mark against their black and white judgment. It sat there like a challenge, its leather gleaming under the boutique's carefully orchestrated lighting. Eva's movements were deliberate, graceful, each gesture calculated to neither provoke nor retreat. "Oh honey," Angela cooed with theatrical sympathy. "This isn't exactly window shopping territory. These pieces have waiting lists longer than most people's credit histories." Her eyes swept over Eva's casual attire with the precision of a security scanner, cataloging every detail that didn't fit their narrow definition of wealth. "Window shopper energy," Nettie whispered to Nina, loud enough for the growing audience to hear. "You can always tell. They come in with their little replica bags, touching everything they can't afford, taking selfies for the gram." Eva's voice cut through their mockery like silk over steel. "Then it's fortunate I'm not here to window shop." She paused, her dark eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "Are you sure you can afford that bet?" The question hung in the air like a chess move nobody saw coming. Nina's confidence flickered for just a moment before her practiced sneer returned. "Sweetheart, let's save everyone some embarrassment. The bag you're admiring starts at $57,000. Maybe try the department store down the street? I hear they have a lovely sale section." "Maybe," Eva replied, her tone as smooth as aged whiskey. "You should try processing my payment." She placed a sleek black card on the counter. No flashy logo, no ostentatious design, just elegant simplicity that spoke louder than any golden embossing ever could. The card caught the light like obsidian, its darkness seeming to absorb the boutique's brilliant illumination. Nina's laugh became more shrill, desperation creeping into its edges. "Oh, this should be entertaining. Nettie, call the manager. We need to document this for our fraud protection protocols." She picked up the card with 2 fingers, holding it like it might contaminate her manicured nails. Honestly, the lengths some people go to for social media attention these days. The boutique buzzed with anticipatory whispers. "Is that bag even real? She's probably just here for photos. Security should escort her out before this gets awkward." The murmurs wrapped around Eva like chains, but she stood taller, her red bag a defiant beacon against their collective doubt. Customers began gathering closer, their shopping forgotten in favor of the unfolding drama. A woman in pearls nudged her companion. "Poor thing doesn't realize what she's gotten herself into." A man in an expensive suit shook his head knowingly. "These influencers get bolder every day." Nina slid the card into the terminal with exaggerated ceremony, her fingers dancing over the keys like a pianist preparing for a funeral march. "Let's see what fantasy land this card takes us to, shall we?" The machine hummed, processing, calculating, reaching into databases that held the secrets of global wealth. The card reader beeped once, twice, then silence. Nina's expression cracked like expensive porcelain hitting marble. Her eyes widened at the screen as if it were speaking an impossible language. The color drained from her face so quickly that her foundation looked suddenly orange against her pale skin. Her hands trembled as she reached for the receipt printer, the paper emerging like a white flag of surrender. The numbers that printed weren't just a balance, they were a declaration of war. Approved, $1,250,000 VIP corporate credit. Lewis Enterprises, primary account holder. The whispers died as if someone had pressed a cosmic mute button. The laughter strangled itself in 3 throats simultaneously. Every pair of eyes in the boutique fixed on the young woman who had just shattered their assumptions with the quiet power of mathematical truth. Angela's voice came out as a whisper. Lewis, as in Lewis Holdings? The question rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Faces that had been smug moments before now showed the dawning horror of recognition. Lewis Holdings, the private equity giant that quietly owned half the luxury brands in Manhattan. The empire that could make or break careers with a single phone call. Eva took the receipt and her card with the same calm she'd maintained throughout their performance. Her fingers didn't shake. Her breathing didn't quicken. She simply folded the paper and slipped it into her jacket pocket like it was a grocery store receipt for milk and bread. "The red bag," she said quietly, her voice carrying absolute authority. "I'll take it." Then she turned and walked toward the boutique's glass doors, her white sneakers silent on the marble floor. Behind her, 3 sales associates stood frozen in their own private apocalypse, while customers whispered frantically into their phones, already spreading the news of what they'd witnessed. Eva paused at the threshold, her hand on the gleaming door handle. Without turning around, she spoke just loud enough for everyone to hear. "You were right about one thing. I can't afford your bet." Her voice carried the hint of a smile. "I can afford so much more." The glass doors closed behind her with a whisper, leaving behind a boutique full of people who were just beginning to understand that they'd witnessed the opening act of a much larger performance. The reckoning had only just begun, and everyone inside those marble walls already knew this story would not stay contained within them. Nina stared at the receipt in her trembling hands, the numbers blurring through tears she hadn't realized were forming. In the space of 5 minutes, her world had shifted beneath her feet, and she was only now beginning to understand how far she had to fall. 6 hours earlier. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Meridian Luxury as Eva Lewis pushed through the glass doors, her school backpack slung over one shoulder. The boutique hummed with its usual quiet energy. Soft classical music, hushed conversations, the gentle click of heels on marble. She had come here directly from Columbia Prep, still wearing her simple denim jacket and white sneakers, drawn by a memory that had been haunting her all week. The red bag sat in the center display case like a jewel in a crown. Italian leather the color of fresh blood, with subtle gold hardware that caught the light just so. Eva approached it slowly, her breath catching in her throat. It was identical to the one her mother had shown her in old photographs. The same bag that had sat on their kitchen counter during lazy Sunday mornings, filled with everything important. Keys, lipstick, and the dreams of a woman who never got to see her daughter grow up. "Can I help you?" The voice belonged to Nina Larson, head sales associate, whose smile was perfectly practiced and completely hollow. She stood behind Eva like a shadow, her black uniform crisp and intimidating. "I'm just looking," Eva replied softly, her eyes still fixed on the bag. "My mother used to have one just like this." "Used to?" Nina's eyebrow arched with practiced sympathy. "Well, vintage pieces can be quite nostalgic. Though this particular model is from our current collection. 57,000. She let the number hang in the air like a price tag on Eva's dreams. Eva nodded, her fingers tracing the air just above the glass case. "She never got to carry hers much. She died when I was 8. The admission was meant to be private, almost sacred, but Nina's expression didn't soften. Instead, her eyes performed a quick calculation, taking in Eva's casual clothes, her school backpack, her youth, and arrived at a conclusion that hardened her features. "I see." Nina's tone shifted, becoming more clinical. "Well, perhaps when you're older, with a more established budget." She began to turn away, dismissing Eva like a teacher ending office hours. "Actually," Eva said, her voice gaining strength, I'd like to try it on. Nina stopped mid-stride. Behind her, Nettie Bevis and Angela Kirkland had materialized like backup dancers, their identical black uniforms and matching expressions creating a wall of skepticism. Other customers began to notice the tension, their own shopping momentarily forgotten. Try it on. Angela laughed, the sound sharp as breaking crystal. Honey, this isn't exactly a rental situation. These bags require serious consideration, Nettie added, her voice dripping with condescension. They're investments. Generational pieces. Not impulse purchases for teenagers with daddy's credit card. The assumption hit Eva like a slap, but she maintained her composure. I understand the investment, she said quietly. That's why I'm here. Nina's smile became predatory. She glanced around the boutique, noting the growing audience of well-dressed customers who had stopped their browsing to watch the unfolding drama. This was better than afternoon television. A young girl who didn't know her place being educated about reality. You know what, Nina announced, her voice carrying across the marble floors. Let's make this interesting. Let's play a little game I like to call 10 for 1. She turned to face the gathering crowd, performing now for their entertainment. If this young lady can actually pay for one bag, I'll personally give her 10 bags from my own commission. Laughter rippled through the boutique like champagne bubbles. Customers nudged each other, amused by the spectacle. Nina basked in their approval, her confidence growing with each chuckle. It's only fair, Angela chimed in, her voice theatrical. We should make education entertaining. Plus, Nettie added with mock generosity, if she can't afford it, at least she'll have learned something valuable about setting realistic expectations. Their laughter became a symphony of privilege, each note designed to remind Eva of her supposed place in their carefully curated world. The performance was flawless. 3 professionals united in their certainty that they were teaching a necessary lesson about the boundaries between dreams and reality. Eva stood in the center of their storm, her mother's memory giving her strength. The red bag seemed to glow in its case, calling to her across the years. She thought of her father's words from that morning. Remember who you are, Eva. Never let anyone make you smaller than your truth. 10 for 1. Eva repeated, her voice cutting through their laughter like a blade through silk. The boutique fell quiet, waiting for her retreat, her embarrassment, her acknowledgement of defeat. Instead, Eva reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew a sleek black card. No flashy logos, no golden embossing. Just elegant simplicity with a discreet crest embossed in the corner. Lewis Global Trust. I accept your bet, she said calmly, placing the card on the glass counter where it caught the light like obsidian. But are you sure you can afford to lose? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the classical music seemed to hold its breath as Nina stared at the card, her practiced confidence wavering for the first time. From his office doorway, the store manager watched with growing unease, unsure whether to intervene or allow the show to continue. The game had begun, but Eva was no longer playing by their rules. The black card lay on the glass counter like a challenge waiting to be answered. Eva's fingers rested lightly beside it. Her posture relaxed despite the electric tension crackling through the boutique's rarefied air. Every eye in the store had fixed on this moment, the intersection of assumptions and truth, where reputations would either be confirmed or shattered. Nina's confidence flickered like a candle in wind as she stared at the card. The discreet crest embossed in its corner seemed to mock her certainty, its elegant simplicity somehow more intimidating than any flashy logo could have been. Her manicured fingers hovered over it, hesitating for the first time since Eva had walked through those glass doors. Well, Eva's voice cut through the silence with surgical precision. I believe you made a bet. The words jolted Nina back to reality. She snatched the card with more force than necessary, her movements sharp with defensive irritation. Of course. Let's get this over with. She slid the obsidian rectangle into the terminal with theatrical confidence, though her hands trembled slightly as she began typing in the transaction amount. The boutique held its collective breath. Customers had abandoned their shopping entirely, forming a loose semicircle around the counter like spectators at a gladiatorial arena. The soft classical music continued to play, but it seemed muted now, overwhelmed by the weight of anticipation. Behind the growing crowd, 17-year-old Madison Chen discreetly held up her phone, its camera capturing every second of the unfolding drama. She'd come in looking for a graduation gift and stumbled into what looked like premium social media content. Her finger hovered over the record button as she whispered to her friend, "This is about to go viral." The terminal hummed, processing, reaching into databases that held the financial secrets of Manhattan's elite. Seconds stretched like hours. Nina's practiced smile became more strained with each passing moment, her certainty eroding like expensive makeup in summer heat. Then the machine beeped. Not the sharp rejecting buzz of a declined card, but the soft melodic chime that every luxury retailer recognized as the sound of serious money. Nina's eyes widened as she stared at the screen, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. The display showed more than just approval. It revealed a corporate priority account with spending limits that made the boutique's most expensive pieces look like pocket change. But it was the company name that made Nina's breath catch in her throat. Lewis Enterprises. Corporate account holder. Unlimited authorization. "That can't be right," Angela whispered, pressing closer to peer over Nina's shoulder. Her voice carried the desperate edge of someone watching their world tilt off its axis. The receipt printer whirred to life, producing a long white strip that unfurled like a flag of surrender. At the top, embossed in elegant script, was a logo that Nina recognized with growing dread. The same logo that appeared on her own paychecks, the same corporate seal that adorned the boutique's quarterly reports. Lewis Enterprises, the parent company that owned Meridian Luxury, along with half the high-end retail brands in Manhattan. "It's probably a stolen corporate card," Nettie muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. She grabbed the receipt, studying it with the intensity of someone hoping to find salvation in fine print. Someone must have lifted it from an executive's wallet. Eva watched their panic with the same calm she'd maintained throughout their performance. "I'll wait for my receipt," she said simply, her tone suggesting she had all the time in the world. The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples of uncertainty that spread through the gathered crowd. Customers who had been laughing minutes earlier now exchanged nervous glances, suddenly uncertain about what they'd witnessed. Madison's phone captured every moment. Nina's trembling hands, Angela's growing pallor, Nettie's desperate attempts to find an explanation that didn't end with their professional destruction. The teenager sensed she was documenting something historic, a moment when the carefully constructed hierarchies of Manhattan's elite would crumble in real time. "The transaction is approved," Nina announced, her voice barely above a whisper. She held the receipt like it might explode, her eyes still fixed on the Lewis Enterprises logo that seemed to pulse with accusatory power. Eva took the paper with steady fingers, folding it carefully before slipping it into her jacket pocket. The red bag sat in its case, waiting, while around them the boutique buzzed with whispered conversations and barely contained chaos. 10 bags, Eva said quietly, her words cutting through the noise like a blade. That was the bet, wasn't it? The reminder hit the three associates like a physical blow. They had promised 10 bags if she could pay for one, confident in their assumption that payment was impossible. Now, staring at the approved transaction and the corporate logo that owned their careers, they realized they had made a wager they were completely unprepared to honor. Behind them, Madison's phone continued recording, capturing every second of what would soon become Manhattan's most talked-about shopping experience. By nightfall, Manhattan pulsed with digital fire. Madison Chen's video had exploded across social media platforms like wildfire through dry timber. What began as a 17-year-old's casual recording had become the most shared retail scandal in recent memory. The hashtag 10 for 1 challenge trended globally within hours, spawning thousands of reaction videos, think pieces, and furious comment threads. The clip was devastating in its simplicity. 37 seconds of crystal-clear footage showing 3 perfectly coiffed sales associates laughing at a young black woman, followed by their stunned silence when her payment processed. Madison had unknowingly captured the exact moment when privilege met its match, and the internet couldn't get enough. "Watch these racist clerks mock a billionaire heiress for being black," read one viral tweet with 2.3 million views. Plot twist, she owns their store. The reaction was swift and merciless. Meridian Luxury's Google reviews plummeted as thousands of users flooded the page with 1-star ratings and scathing comments. Disgusting behavior toward a customer based on race and age. This is why luxury retail needs a complete overhaul. Fire these employees immediately. TikTok users dissected every frame, zooming in on the clerk's expressions, analyzing body language, creating split-screen comparisons between their initial arrogance and final horror. Instagram influencers posted solidarity stories. Twitter threads explored the broader implications of retail racism in luxury spaces. The corporate communications team at Lewis Enterprises worked through the night, their conference room littered with empty coffee cups and crisis management manuals. Phone calls flew between PR executives, legal teams, and brand managers as they tried to contain a story that had already metastasized beyond control. The boutique's phone hasn't stopped ringing, reported Sarah Martinez, head of corporate communications, her voice hoarse from hours of damage control. Local news wants interviews. The Times is running a piece tomorrow. This is a full-scale crisis. Meanwhile, 43 floors above the chaos, Eva Lewis sat in the window seat of her penthouse suite, Central Park spreading below her like a dark ocean dotted with golden lights. The red bag rested beside her, finally in her possession but somehow emptied of the joy she'd expected to feel. The leather was perfect, the craftsmanship flawless, but it carried the weight of a day that had spiraled far beyond her control. She scrolled through her phone, watching video after video of the afternoon's confrontation. Strangers had turned her private moment of remembrance into a public spectacle. Comments poured in calling her a hero, a symbol, a catalyst for change. Titles she'd never asked for and didn't want. She had simply wanted to honor her mother's memory by purchasing a bag, not become the face of a movement. Her father's footsteps echoed against the marble floors as Elias Lewis approached from his study, still wearing his business suit despite the late hour. He moved with the controlled grace of someone accustomed to bearing the weight of empires, but tonight his shoulders seemed slightly bowed by concern for his daughter. "Did you finally buy it?" he asked softly, settling into the chair across from her window seat. Eva's fingers traced the bag's smooth leather surface, her touch gentle as a prayer. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But not the way I wanted." The admission hung between them like smoke from an extinguished candle. Elias studied his daughter's profile against the city lights, seeing not the billionaire heiress the world was calling her, but the 8-year-old girl who had cried when her mother's things were packed away. "The video?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "I never meant for this to happen." Eva's voice carried a fragility that boardrooms and stock reports never revealed. "I just wanted her bag. The same red one from the photographs. I thought it would make me feel closer to her somehow." Through the window, Central Park stretched endlessly, its paths invisible in the darkness but present nonetheless, like the connection between a daughter and a mother who existed now only in memories and old photographs. "Your mother would have been proud," Elias said quietly. "Not of the spectacle, but of how you handled yourself. You never let them diminish you." "But they tried." Eva's reflection stared back at her from the glass, superimposed over the city below. "They looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong. Someone who couldn't possibly deserve to be there." The weight of the day settled around them both, the laughter that had cut like knives, the humiliation designed to teach her place, the revelation that had turned tables but couldn't undo the cruelty that came before it. Outside, Manhattan continued its relentless pulse, unaware that in a penthouse suite overlooking Central Park, a young woman sat holding a red bag and wondering if the price of dignity was always this complicated. The viral clip would continue spreading through the night, but Eva Lewis, daughter, heiress, and reluctant symbol, simply wanted to remember her mother in peace. The call came at 7:47 a.m., cutting through the morning calm of Meridian Luxury's corporate headquarters like a scalpel through silk. Rebecca Walsh, director of operations, had barely settled at her desk with her first cup of coffee when her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom with barely contained panic. "Ms. Walsh, we have Lewis Global Holdings on line 1. They're requesting an immediate audit of the Madison Avenue location." The coffee cup slipped from Rebecca's fingers, sending a cascade of dark liquid across quarterly reports that suddenly seemed insignificant. Lewis Global Holdings didn't make requests, they issued directives. And when the parent company that owned your entire operation called for an audit, it meant someone's career was about to end in spectacular fashion. 3 miles away, in the executive suite of Lewis Tower, Elias Lewis stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan spreading below him like a chessboard where he held all the pieces. His voice carried the controlled authority of someone who had built an empire on the principle that actions carried consequences. "The store that mocked my daughter belongs to us," he told his assistant, Marcus Chen, who stood ready with a tablet full of corporate hierarchies and personnel files. "Let's see how deep the rot runs." Marcus's fingers flew across the screen, pulling up organizational charts, employee records, and performance reviews. "Should I schedule a meeting with their management team?" "No meetings," Elias replied, his tone as cold as winter steel. "Meetings allow preparation. I want raw truth, not polished presentations." He turned from the window, his decision crystallizing with corporate finality. Full operational audit, financial records, hiring practices, customer service protocols, employee conduct reviews. Everything. The directive shot through Lewis Global's corporate machinery like electricity through copper wire. Within minutes, auditors were gathering files, HR executives were pulling personnel records, and legal teams were reviewing employment contracts. The machinery of corporate justice had awakened, and it moved with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. By 9 a.m., internal memos had begun leaking to industry publications. Lewis Global launches emergency audit of flagship boutique following viral incident. Meridian Luxury under corporate investigation after racist treatment of owner's daughter. The headlines spread through Manhattan's business community like wildfire, turning executive breakfasts into whispered strategy sessions about damage control and liability. At Meridian Luxury's Madison Avenue location, Nina Larson pulled her BMW into the employee parking garage, already running late after a sleepless night spent fielding calls from friends who had seen the viral video. She had convinced herself that corporate would stand behind her. After all, she was their top performer, their most reliable closer of high-value sales. The sight that greeted her as she emerged onto the street shattered that delusion like crystal against concrete. News vans lined the sidewalk like modern siege engines, their satellite dishes pointed skyward, their crews setting up cameras with the efficiency of a military operation. Reporters clutched microphones and notepads, scanning the boutique's entrance for any sign of the employees who had become overnight symbols of retail prejudice. Nina Larson. A reporter spotted her through the glass doors, his voice carrying across the marble floors like an accusation. "How do you respond to allegations of racial profiling?" Nina's perfect composure cracked. She retreated deeper into the store, her heels clicking frantically against the marble as cameras tracked her movement through the windows. Behind her, Nettie and Angela huddled near the jewelry counter, their black uniforms making them look like defendants awaiting verdict. "This is insane," Angela whispered, her voice shaking. "It was just a joke. We were just having fun with a customer who was clearly out of her league." "Fun?" Nettie's laugh was bitter as broken glass. "Look around, Angela. Does this look like fun to you?" The boutique that had been their kingdom yesterday now felt like a prison. Every surface that had reflected their authority now seemed to mock their fall. The red bag Eva had purchased sat in the display case, a crimson reminder of their miscalculation. Nina's phone buzzed with a corporate email marked urgent. The subject line made her blood turn to ice. Immediate suspension pending investigation. All staff Madison Avenue location. Their laughter from yesterday echoed in the marble halls like ghosts of their own making. They had performed for an audience, confident in their power to judge and exclude. Now that same performance, captured in 37 seconds of digital permanence, had become the instrument of their undoing. Outside, Manhattan's business district buzzed with the news that Lewis Global Holdings was conducting a public autopsy of prejudice in luxury retail. The earthquake they had triggered with their cruel bet was only beginning to reshape the landscape around them. The black SUVs arrived at Meridian Luxury like storm clouds gathering before lightning strikes. 3 vehicles in perfect formation, their tinted windows reflecting the chaos of news crews and curious onlookers who had transformed Madison Avenue into an impromptu theater of corporate reckoning. Eva Lewis stepped from the center vehicle with the same calm grace she had displayed 24 hours earlier, but everything else had changed. Today, she was flanked by 2 discreet security personnel whose presence spoke volumes about the gravity of the moment. Their movements were precise, professional, creating a protective corridor through the crowd of reporters shouting questions and cameras tracking every step. "Eva." How does it feel to be vindicated? Will you be pressing charges? What message do you have for victims of retail discrimination? She moved through the cacophony without acknowledgement, her red bag from yesterday replaced by a simple black leather portfolio that seemed to pulse with legal significance. The glass doors of Meridian luxury opened before her like a curtain rising on the second act of a drama that had captivated the nation. Inside, the boutique felt like a mausoleum. The same marble floors that had echoed with cruel laughter now reflected only the harsh glare of television lights. Nina, Nettie, and Angela stood frozen behind the counter like mannequins, their perfect composure from yesterday replaced by the hollow-eyed exhaustion of people who had spent the night watching their careers disintegrate in real time. The sight of Eva entering with security made Nina's face drain of what little color remained. Her manicured hands trembled as she gripped the counter's edge, seeking stability in a world that had shifted beneath her feet. "We didn't know," Nina began, her voice cracking like ice under pressure. "You didn't care to know," Eva interrupted, her words cutting through the silence with surgical precision. She approached the counter with measured steps, each footfall echoing like a judge's gavel. "You saw what you wanted to see. You judged what you thought you could judge." The cameras that had captured her humiliation yesterday now recorded her return, but the power dynamic had undergone a complete reversal. Where yesterday she had stood alone against their collective mockery, today she commanded the space with quiet authority. Eva opened her portfolio and withdrew a single sheet of paper, the receipt from yesterday's transaction, crisp and white as a surrender flag. She placed it on the glass counter between them, the Lewis Enterprises logo seeming to glow under the boutique's lighting. "You said 10 for 1, she stated, her voice carrying the weight of immutable fact. "Here's one, and consider this your lesson in value." The receipt lay there like evidence in a trial where the verdict had already been decided. Nina stared at it as if it might transform into something less damning, but the numbers remained constant, the corporate seal unchanged, the reality unalterable. Angela tried to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're sorry. We made a mistake." "You made a choice," Eva corrected. Every laugh, every whisper, every moment of mockery was deliberate. You chose cruelty over kindness, assumption over inquiry, prejudice over professionalism. The glass doors opened again, and Elias Lewis entered with the controlled fury of a storm barely contained. His presence filled the boutique like compressed air seeking release. Store manager David Kim emerged from his office, his face pale with the understanding that his career was about to end in the most public way possible. "Mr. Lewis," David began, his voice shaking. "If we could discuss this privately." "No," Elias replied, his tone surgical in its precision. "Privacy is what allowed this rot to fester. Publicity is what will cure it." He stepped closer to David, his voice carrying across the marble floors for every camera to capture. "Your employees mocked one of your owner's heirs. You should pray all you lose is your job." The words weren't delivered in anger. They were stated as corporate fact, cold and immutable as financial law. Elias possessed the controlled authority of someone who had built empires on the principle that actions carried consequences, and those consequences would be both public and permanent. Nina watched her world collapse in real time, understanding finally that yesterday's laughter had become today's requiem. The viral video had made them symbols of everything wrong with retail prejudice, and Eva's return had transformed their humiliation into a master class in corporate justice. The lesson was simple, brutal, and completely public. Dignity could not be purchased, but disrespect always came with a price that few could afford to pay. The story exploded across every major news network like a controlled detonation of corporate accountability. CNN's Chirin read, "Billionaire Heiress humiliated in boutique, now owns the chain," while Fox Business dissected the financial implications of viral retail scandals. MSNBC dedicated an entire hour to exploring systemic prejudice in luxury retail, using Eva's experience as a case study in how assumptions about wealth and race intersected in Manhattan's most exclusive spaces. The View hosted a heated panel discussion that went viral in its own right. "This isn't just about one store," Whoopi Goldberg declared, her voice carrying the authority of lived experience. "This is about every time someone looked at a black person and decided they didn't belong somewhere." Social media transformed Eva into an unlikely icon. #SilentBillionaireHeir trended for 3 consecutive days as users shared their own stories of retail discrimination. Her calm composure in the face of humiliation became a symbol of grace under pressure, spawning motivational memes and inspirational quotes attributed to her quiet dignity. "I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect," Eva said during her only television interview, conducted in the understated elegance of her father's corporate conference room. The interviewer, veteran journalist Anderson Cooper, had expected corporate talking points but found instead a young woman whose thoughtfulness belied her years. "But maybe some lessons need an audience," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had never asked to become a symbol but accepted the responsibility nonetheless. "If my experience prevents this from happening to someone else, then perhaps the public nature of it serves a purpose." The interview aired on a Thursday evening and was viewed by 12 million people. Eva's measured responses, her refusal to celebrate the clerk's downfall, and her focus on systemic change rather than personal vindication transformed public perception from seeing her as a victim seeking revenge to recognizing her as a leader advocating for dignity. By Friday morning, the inevitable conclusion arrived with corporate efficiency. Nina Larson, Nettie Bevis, and Angela Kirkland received identical termination letters via certified mail. The language was clinical, professional, and absolute. Employment terminated due to conduct inconsistent with company values and policies regarding customer service and professional behavior. Nina read her letter 3 times before the reality penetrated her shock. 24 hours of viral infamy had cost her not just this job, but likely any future position in luxury retail. Her LinkedIn profile was flooded with comments. Her professional reputation reduced to 37 seconds of documented cruelty that would follow her indefinitely. Angela wept over her termination papers, finally understanding that actions performed for an audience carried consequences far beyond the moment of performance. Nettie simply stared at hers, remembering how their laughter had felt so natural, so justified, so completely righteous in the moment. But the story's final chapter was being written in Lewis Tower's executive suite, where Elias Lewis stood before a team of corporate strategists, communications experts, and brand managers. The proposal before them would transform crisis into opportunity, scandal into purpose. "The Lewis Human Dignity Fund," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone reshaping corporate culture in real time. A comprehensive initiative promoting inclusion, dignity, and respect in luxury workplace environments. The fund would require every Lewis Global Holdings subsidiary to implement new training protocols, establish anonymous reporting systems for discrimination, and create mentorship programs connecting underrepresented communities with luxury retail careers. The boutique where Eva had been humiliated would become the fund's flagship training center, transformed from a symbol of prejudice into a beacon of inclusive excellence. "We're not just changing policies," Elias explained to the assembled team. "We're changing culture. Every employee in every location will understand that dignity is not negotiable, that respect is not optional, and that our success is measured not just by profit margins but by how we treat every person who walks through our doors." The announcement made financial headlines and social justice news simultaneously. Stock prices for Lewis Global Holdings actually rose as investors recognized the long-term value of proactive corporate responsibility. The fund's mission statement, co-authored by Eva herself, became required reading in business schools studying crisis management and ethical leadership. Eva's quiet courage had inadvertently sparked a corporate revolution, transforming her personal moment of humiliation into a national conversation about dignity, respect, and the true meaning of luxury. Not just in products, but in human treatment. The viral video that had devastated 3 careers had ultimately created thousands of new opportunities for inclusion in an industry that had too long confused exclusivity with exclusion. The letter arrived on cream-colored stationery, delivered by hand to the Lewis Tower reception desk 3 weeks after the termination letters had been sent. The envelope bore no return address, only Eva's name written in careful cursive that spoke of desperation disguised as propriety. Inside, Nina's handwriting covered 2 pages in the kind of precise script taught in expensive private schools, the same education that had convinced her she belonged at the top of social hierarchies, that she possessed the authority to judge who deserved respect and who could be dismissed. "Miss Lewis," the letter began, "I know I have no right to expect your attention, let alone your forgiveness. But I cannot sleep, cannot eat, cannot exist in the wreckage of what I've become without attempting to explain what I cannot excuse." The words continued across pages soaked with remorse that felt genuine despite arriving 3 weeks too late. Nina wrote of sleepless nights replaying 37 seconds of documented cruelty, of job interviews that ended the moment her name was Googled, of friends who no longer returned calls and family members who spoke in careful euphemisms about her situation. Eva read the letter twice before folding it carefully and slipping it into her jacket pocket. She had received hundreds of messages since the video went viral. Corporate executives seeking meetings, journalists requesting interviews, advocacy groups asking her to speak at conferences. But this handwritten plea from the woman who had orchestrated her humiliation carried a different weight entirely. The cafe Nina had suggested was deliberately modest, a small French bistro in the Upper East Side where celebrities and socialites rarely ventured, where conversations could unfold without paparazzi or viral documentation. Eva arrived first, choosing a corner table that offered privacy while maintaining clear sightlines to the entrance. Nina appeared 20 minutes later, her appearance shocking in its transformation. The polished sales associate who had commanded Meridian Luxury's marble floors had been replaced by someone who moved with the hesitant uncertainty of the genuinely fallen. Her hair, once immaculately styled, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes, while expensive, hung differently on a frame that seemed diminished by shame. She approached Eva's table like a defendant approaching a judge, her hands trembling as she pulled out the opposite chair. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the cafe's gentle murmur. "I wasn't sure you would." Eva studied the woman who had laughed at her mother's memory, who had turned dignity into entertainment for a boutique full of strangers. 3 weeks of consequences had carved new lines around Nina's eyes, aged her in ways that makeup couldn't conceal. "I didn't know who you were," Nina said, the words tumbling out like a confession she'd been rehearsing for weeks. "I swear if I had known you were Elias Lewis's daughter, if I had understood." "That's the problem," Eva interrupted, her voice cutting through Nina's justifications with surgical precision. "You needed to." The words landed between them like stones dropped in still water, creating ripples of understanding that spread outward from the moment of impact. Nina's face crumpled as she grasped the fundamental truth Eva was revealing, that respect should never depend on recognition, that dignity should never require credentials. "You didn't need to know I was his daughter," Eva continued, her tone neither cruel nor kind, simply factual. "You needed to know I was human. You needed to understand that every person who walks through those doors deserves the same consideration you would give someone you recognized as important." Nina nodded, tears streaming down cheeks that had once been animated by cruel laughter. "I understand now. But it's too late, isn't it? The damage is done." Eva reached into her pocket and withdrew Nina's letter, folding it once more before placing it beside her untouched teacup. She pulled a pen from her purse and wrote 2 words on the envelope's back: "Lesson learned." Standing to leave, Eva paused beside Nina's chair. "Change isn't about recognition," she said quietly. "It's about recognition changing you." She walked away without looking back, leaving Nina alone with her cold coffee and the understanding that some apologies arrived too late to prevent consequences but just in time to begin redemption. The cafe continued its gentle hum around a woman learning that accountability was the first step toward becoming someone worthy of the forgiveness she sought but might never receive. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel shimmered with crystalline elegance as Manhattan's most influential figures gathered for the annual Lewis Human Dignity Initiative Gala. 12 months had transformed a viral moment of cruelty into a movement that had reshaped corporate culture across the luxury retail industry. Eva Lewis stood backstage, her reflection caught in the antique mirror that had witnessed decades of New York's most significant moments. The red silk gown she wore moved like liquid fire, its color deliberately chosen to match the handbag that had started everything. The same bag that now sat in the Smithsonian as part of an exhibit on social justice and corporate accountability. Her mother's memory lived in every fold of the fabric, every careful detail of the evening's choreography. The girl who had once stood alone against cruel laughter had become the woman leading a national conversation about dignity, respect, and the true meaning of luxury. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice carried across the hushed ballroom, "please welcome the founder and chairwoman of the Lewis Human Dignity Initiative, Eva Lewis." She emerged into light that seemed to embrace her, moving across the stage with the same calm grace that had once defied mockery in a Madison Avenue boutique. The audience, CEOs, Politicians, celebrities, and activists rose as one, their applause thundering against mahogany walls lined with portraits of American royalty. But Eva's attention focused on a single figure at the back of the hall. Elias Lewis stood among the crowd, his face illuminated by pride that transcended corporate success or financial achievement. This was a father watching his daughter transform personal pain into global purpose. She approached the podium with measured steps, her red gown catching light like hope made visible. The same hands that had once trembled while placing a black card on marble now rested steadily on the lectern as she faced an audience that hung on her every word. "A year ago," she began, her voice carrying the authority of lived experience, "I walked into a boutique to buy a handbag. I wanted something my mother had once loved, a connection to memories that death couldn't steal." The ballroom fell silent, breath held collectively as she continued. "What I found instead was a lesson that changed not just my life, but the lives of thousands of employees across our industry." She paused, her eyes sweeping across faces that represented billions in corporate wealth and influence. "Dignity isn't bought," she declared, her words ringing with conviction. "It's chosen, especially when no one's watching." The silence that followed was profound, heavy with the weight of recognition. These were people accustomed to power, but Eva spoke of a different kind of strength, the quiet power that came from standing firm in one's worth regardless of recognition or reward. The Lewis Human Dignity Initiative has trained over 50,000 retail employees in the past year, she continued. "We've established mentorship programs, anonymous reporting systems, and cultural transformation protocols that prioritize humanity over hierarchy." Statistics flowed like poetry from her lips, unemployment rates dropping in underrepresented communities, customer satisfaction scores rising across participating retailers, a measurable shift in how luxury businesses approached inclusion and respect. But as applause erupted again, Eva's voice softened to something almost whispered, meant for the cameras but carrying the intimacy of prayer. "For Mom." The two words traveled across the ballroom like ripples in still water, reaching her father's ears as he wiped tears from eyes that had seen empires built and legacies secured, but had never witnessed anything as beautiful as his daughter's transformation of pain into purpose. The gala concluded with a standing ovation that lasted 7 minutes, but the real celebration occurred in the quiet moment when father and daughter embraced backstage, both understanding that some victories transcend business success. Later that evening, news outlets across the globe carried footage of Eva's speech. The hashtag Quiet Power movement trended worldwide as millions shared stories of their own moments when dignity had been tested and chosen. Corporate executives announced new diversity initiatives. Universities added Eva's speech to required curricula for business ethics courses. The final images showed Eva walking through Manhattan at dawn, the city awakening around her like a promise kept. Her red handbag swung gently at her side, no longer a symbol of humiliation overcome but of legacy embraced. She moved through the streets with the calm confidence of someone who understood that true power whispered rather than shouted, that real luxury lay not in exclusion but in inclusion, that the most valuable inheritance was not wealth but the wisdom to use it with dignity. The girl who had once stood alone against cruel laughter had become the woman leading a movement that would outlast them all. Calm, radiant, unstoppable.